Howdy folks, this is Chris with GCM PC Tech, and we're doing part 3 of the Masterbox q300p build. This is where we are going to be putting it in the MSI Gaming Pro B350M motherboard. This is where we are going to be setting everything up to put my daughter's processor and graphics card in to update the BIOS. So let me go ahead and pull this out. It is usually advisable to keep the box out so that you can use the box as a work surface while working on your motherboard. And I'm going to be using it as a bit of a test bench to the way they tape this stuff. I'm working downstairs so that way I'm not on carpet for this part, and because carpet is an attractor for static electricity. Oh, crap, I forgot my microphone. Alright, so first things first, we are going to have to remove these stock brackets, because the stock coolers that come with these these processors do not utilize the old style AMD brackets. So you just simply take the screws out. You want to keep this stuff just in case you decide to get a cooler that will actually utilize these. You just simply remove the screws. You set the brackets off to the side. You'll leave the backing plate in place. Another good reason to use the the box for the test bed. Damn it. There we go. And now we have brackets removed. So now you're going to lift this little arm up like so. You take your processor. There's a little triangle on the corner. There's a triangle on the corner of the socket. You want to line those up. You want to be very careful in setting this processor down because of all those little pins. Just carefully set that down in there. Kind of give it a little bit of a wiggle to make sure it's seated. And then lower the arm down. And voila. Now, because this motherboard only has 2 DIMM slots, again, going to be using the Ripjaws 5 3200 megabyte kit. Or megahertz kit, not megabyte, megahertz. Megahertz. This is DDR4 RAM. Stupid packaging. There's a notch partway into the RAM stick. Coincides with a notch on the socket, so I just pop these little tabs back, line up the notch with the slot, and just push it down in until you hear the click. Now, I know I may be doing things a little out of order because I have yet to put the cooler on, but you always want to put the RAM in first before you put any cooler on to make sure you are going to have clearance. It's not usually an issue with stock coolers, but if you're going to put like an aftermarket cooler on, you want to, at that point, put the RAM in first to make sure you're going to clear the RAM, because this is high profile RAM. So now, because usually the stock coolers have thermal paste pre-applied, because I have to swap processors back and forth, I had to use a already used heatsink. So that means thermal paste. Now, a lot of people like to argue about how this is supposed to be applied. All you really need to do is just squirt on a little pea-size amount, like so. And what you do, the fan header for CPU fan is, wow, this board is not, yeah. CPU fan header is right there, so you want to try to orient the fan in such a way that you can easily plug it in. So, yeah, I think I'll do it this way. And you just simply carefully set the okay. Here's a bit of an issue. If you have this AMD logo part here and you try to put that close to the RAM, it will hit. So, therefore, we got to make sure we put that over to the other side, away from the RAM, and voila. Now, when you set the heatsink down on there, do not wiggle it around because you'll end up smearing that paste all over the place. You want to get a nice even spread. So then all you do is just start by tightening down. You go crossways. This one's going to require a little bit of force. Just get the threads started, and you're going to go crossways, kind of like the rim on a car. If anybody's ever changed a tire, you don't tighten all the way down until you got every screw started. Now, these are such that they will only tighten down so far and then they will stop. So you basically just kind of screw them down until they stop. Do not over tighten these. I've been taught years ago there's a difference between mechanic tight and computer tight. You want computer tight, you don't want mechanic tight. You're not torquing these. There's no worry about this stuff flying off at high speed, so you just gotta tighten it down until the threads stop, and then you are done. Now we hook up the CPU fan. Let's see if I can. Ta-da! And you just kind of tuck the cord around as best as possible. Okay, now we are going to set the graphics card down on. Again, you want to pop the little tab open on this, and since we're not putting this in a case just yet, we're just using this as a test bench. The fan side goes down away from the processor. It's usually a little more self-explanatory when you are putting it in a case, but in this instance, we just carefully line it up. Oh, gotta move that until you hear the click. Now, all we got to do is get our power supply, plug in the 24-pin, the 8-pin CPU, hook up to the monitor, hook up the keyboard and mouse, and test fire this. So that will be coming up next. Okay, this is where you're going to be seeing the motherboard only, not me. This is where we have to cross the 2 pins for the power switch in order to get this to fire up. So here goes nothing. This should go through several boot loops in order to make sure Alright, she posted. So now we have to go ahead and update the BIOS. Okay, now we plug in the USB. This is where we come over here and we hit M flash. It will ask you if you want to reboot and enter flash mode. You click yes. Motherboard will reset. It should, in theory, go immediately right back into flash mode. Enter flash mode. There we go. Now it's recognizing the flash drive. You want to come down here and click on the file that, select that file. Now this is where you do not want to cut off power, you do not want to interrupt in any way, just let it flash, let it go through its thing. You don't want to take out the flash drive, you don't want to do anything to disrupt this at all. Because if you do, then all of a sudden you no longer have a working motherboard. And then once this is all done, then we can remove this processor and this graphics card, put in the Ryzen 3 2200G with integrated Ryzen Vega 8 graphics. And it should be able to then install the motherboard into the case, into the Masterbox Q300p by Coolermaster, and get the rest of this build done. And this process takes a little bit. You just got to be patient. Okay, now we're at about 90%. It's slowly creeping up to about 100%. Hopefully, with all, if everything is successful, 100%, it should reboot. There. We are now into the BIOS, and it now says BIOS build date 3/19/2018. We now have the current BIOS for this motherboard. And we save the changes. Yes. Alright, now it's time to prep the case for installing the motherboard and finishing up this build. Seems my dog wants to help. If you had opposable thumbs, Milo, you could help. First things first, we're going to be installing the I/O shield, the rear I/O shield. You just simply put it in with the audio input and outputs on the bottom. So you just kind of slip that in the back of the case. Just kind of push it in until you hear it snap into place. And then it's in. Next comes the bag of goodies that come with the case. And we carefully open this up so that we don't end up spilling all the screws out all over the floor. Baggie comes with a nice little tool for installing the motherboard standoffs. Separate all the standoffs that it comes with. Because on the inside of this case, because this case does support micro ATX and mini ITX, you have to look inside the case. There's markings for with an M for micro ATX and an I for mini ITX. So it already has two pre-installed standoffs. So it's just a matter of trying to figure out which standoffs go where. Definitely need one here. Sometimes it's a good idea to look at the motherboard and kind of gauge from there where all you would need standoffs. Get two real close together there, which would be those two there. Usually I like to start the standoffs by hand and then use the included tool to then tighten them in place. If you start them by hand, you're less likely to cross thread them and screw up the mounting of them, as the motherboard standoffs are used to separate the bottom of the motherboard from the metal of the case so that you don't accidentally short anything out. So we take a look at the motherboard. Look at that. That one and that one. So it doesn't look like we need. Got that one that lines up with that one. That one lines up with that. That one. Let's take a look, see. Sometimes it doesn't hurt to kind of set the motherboard up in place. Get an idea of which hole you gotta put the standoff in. And then that looks like it's it. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Does not look like any other holes for. Alrighty then. We've got 2 extra standoffs. Sweet. Shut that off and get yourself a magnetized screwdriver. Put the tool on and carefully tighten the standoffs down. Do not over tighten these, you will strip them out. A couple of these are going to be a little difficult to get to, but with a little patience, a little perseverance, you can get them in place and get them tightened. Just be patient, take your time. Again, you don't want to over tighten them and strip the threads out of the case or ruin a standoff. Just because I got 2 extra standoffs doesn't mean I want to waste them. Just snug it up. Again, computer tight, not mechanic tight. Now, in a lot of cases, you would be removing as many of the side panels as possible to get to everything, but because this has 2 fans already installed, I don't have to remove the front panel. And I'm not putting fans in just yet on the top, because I don't know if it's going to need it or not, so I'm leaving the top panel alone. Oops. So, therefore, now the motherboard tray is prepped. So now, kind of tilt the case back a little bit, slide the motherboard in at a slight angle, And I've lost my screwdriver. Oh, there it is. Get yourself started with a motherboard screw. I usually like to go for the center one that has the centering pin on it. Just tighten it down enough to snug up the motherboard and hold it in place. And then install the rest of the screws. Normally I would be laying the case down on its side, but in order for that to be seen on camera, it would have to be, the camera would have to be overhead and the case would be laid down on its side. So I don't have that kind of rigging in my house, so therefore I have to make do with what I got. And voila, motherboard is installed. Let's go through and check. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 screws. Motherboard's installed. Now ready for installing the drives and doing cable management. All right, next we're going to be installing the boot drive. If you remember correctly in my previous video, I said I was going to be installing a 120 gig SSD for the boot drive. I may upgrade it in the future. I still think 120 gigabytes is acceptable for a boot drive. A lot of others would disagree, but I think it's still alright. Now, with this, the unique thing with this case is it's got these little rubber mounts that you install on the drive with these screws here, and then you just kind of clip them up in place on the inside of the enclosure. I'm just trying to figure out how the hell this is supposed to work. And we'll give it a try, and if it doesn't work, then we do something a little bit different. This is a very unique mounting system for SSDs. So, it looks like you pretty much orient this any way you want, but I am going to be doing it in such a way to aid in cable management. I'm going to have the power and data connector facing the bottom. And then I believe that just snaps in place like that. And voila. So now, carefully slide the stuff out of the way. So that way we can now turn the computer around. And do a little bit of tightening of the screws. So that way that SSD doesn't go anywhere. Not like it's going to grow legs and jump out or anything, but you never know. That would be kind of funny to see a SSD sprout little legs. That would be kind of funny. Anyway, okay, so now that we got the SSD installed, next up is the hard drive. That way we can put all of our games and pictures and videos and all that fun stuff on the hard drive. They never make these things easy to get into. Beauty part about this case is it's got a removable hard drive caddy. So therefore, take more of the included screws, make sure the threads fit. Yep, they do. Need 4 of these. 1, 2, 3, 4. we take our hard drive caddy like this. We're going to mount our hard drive. Aha, here we are. Start the screws by hand. And then in case you're wondering, the noises you're hearing is my daughter taking my dog out. Apparently he couldn't hold it. So now we got these screws in place. Gently tighten them down, snug them up. The other nice thing about this hard drive caddy is the fact that it's got a captive thumb screw, so it does make it easier for not losing that screw. Why is that? Okay. There. It's a little spring loaded, but it'll work. So now we've got all of our hardware installed. Now comes the fun part of cable management. So I always like to work with the big cables first. First one being important, being the 24-pin CPU connector, or 24-pin motherboard connector. So I route it through this hole here. Turn the case around. Now these are keyed in only a certain way. They'll only go into the motherboard only one way. So there's a little locking tab right here. You have to look for the corresponding notch. And then just kind of maneuver the cable around. Just stick it in the spot on the motherboard. And you push it in place until you hear the click. Then it's all plugged in and nice and neatly tucked around behind the motherboard tray. Next up we have the 8-pin CPU connector. Now some cases have a spot up here. This one actually does. So what we do is locate the 8-pin CPU connector, and we are going to carefully route it up through this corner, uppermost corner. There's a little cutout right up there. Allows for pass-through of the 8-pin CPU. Give yourself as much slack as you need, so that way when you go to turn it around and plug it in, you can actually reach it. Now this is a 4+4 pin. It does not necessarily need to be plugged in both at the same time, just plugged in only one way. There's a little catch and a little latch on the inside. So you just kind of position the cable. Finicky little thing. There's one part of it. Some motherboards will actually have only a 4-pin. And there we go. 8-pin CPU connector plugged in, very neatly tucked away. So now we circle this back around. Now that we got the two biggest cables all tucked around, now we can look for ways of cable management. So I like to tuck this around this way. And voila, nice and neatly routed. Now for the 24 pin. This case came with a nice supply of zip ties. So therefore we're going to zip tie 24 pin up out of the way. Nice thing is this computer not having a basement, it doesn't seem to be a problem. Or power supply shroud doesn't seem to be that big a problem because there's plenty of cable management room back here behind the motherboard tray. Allows for a lot of cable management. So I've not put too many systems together, so I'm not the greatest with cable management, but that doesn't look too bad if I do say so myself. I always like to wait and cut these off when I'm finished up. And now we've got some connectors that are not going to be needed, as this is not a modular power supply, so it does come with extras that you just are forced to kind of tuck around wherever you can. But like the Molex, we don't really need Molex, so that just gets tucked off to the side. And again, beauty part with this case is we've got beautiful cable management space. I'd say darn near a full inch. And with the hard drive where it is, I can tuck wires under there as well. Now, because of the separation between the hard drive and the SSD, I cannot just simply use one of these connectors and try to expect it to reach. Oh, maybe I will. I spoke too soon. Okay, so let's try this. And you want to be careful plugging in the SATA power, because if you're not careful, you will snap off the little ends, and then you're pretty much SOL for plugging in power. And just as I suspected, it's not going to reach. So, perfectly fine. We have the extra SATA power, so we'll run that right over to here. Something I'm going to try doing. I'm going to remove the, I don't know. Ah, yes. These Molex power connectors are like an elongated L shape. You gotta make sure you line that up with the connector on the item you're plugging in. There. Now we have a certain amount of cleaning up to do with the cables. Because this is a processor with a built-in graphics card, we do not need the PCI Express power connector. So, the fact that we have such ample room under the hard drive, you just stuff that cable right up under there. Keeps the inside of the case nice and neat and tidy. So, now all we got left is to clean up the SATA power, the excess. Now we have the front I/O connectors. Now, these can get routed through this little hole right here, bottom of the motherboard tray. So that way they can be accessed from inside the case. I flip this around. And now comes the fun part. the front I/O. I like to start on this side of the board and work my way over, which that would be the front panel audio, HD audio connector. Now these have only certain, it's only plug in one way. There's a pin missing that's blocked off, so it will not allow a pin to go into that. So you can't, unless you force it and bend pins, you really can't make a mistake. So you just simply locate the header on the motherboard for the audio, and just carefully plug that in, and you are off to the races. You carefully tuck that cable off to the side here. Due to the amount of room we have, I can actually tuck it down so that it's kind of right in there. See, nice and neat and tidy. Okay, so now the next connector. Now this is one that is really prone to breaking if you're not careful. This is the USB 3.0 header for the front USB connectors. This has got a notch at the top of it, or like a protruding tab, or whatever you want to call it, little nubbins. There's a little cutout right there, so you just kind of line that up carefully. Just carefully push that on, you'll hear a click. Not really a whole lot you can do to cable manage that to get it up out of the way. So you're left with this big hunkin' cable right there, but not really a big problem. So now comes the front connectors, your reset switch, power LED, hard drive LED, power switch, and power LED plus. So this is where you have to get the manual out. You need to look to see what the pins are, or what the position the pins are on the board. This would be on, let's see, JFP1. So they're labeled 1 through 10, even though 10 has no pin. So you look at the orientation of the pin layout, you look for it on the board. What I like to do is, because of the fact that the connector's not looking like this on the motherboard, I like to turn it like this. So that way it looks just like it does on the board. So then I can count the pins. Now 10 is the one that doesn't have a pin. So I go looking for, alright, let's see. Well, let's do the power switch first. So right there is the power switch. So and the power switch really doesn't matter which direction, what the polarity is you plug it in at. It's just bridging the gap between the, bridging the circuit. So, but in case you're wondering, if it's not marked, the positive has a little arrow at the end of the connector. So we know that by looking at the book, looking for the power switch, it is number 6 and number 8 pin. Okay, so that would be top right. Just kind of slide it on. You don't have to be forceful with the pins. Next one is hard disk drive LED, positive and minus. Disk drive LED. Now this one you do have to worry about polarity, so I gotta flip it so the words are actually facing down. That would be 1 and 3, which would be lower. You know what? Start with the bottom first and then work our way up. Lower left, 2 pins. Slide that on in place. Now we got reset switch, which is 5 and 7. So we look for 5 and 7. reset switch. There we go. Pin number 9 is reserved. That's right below pin number 10, so you're not going to be plugging anything into that. So next, you've got these two little individual pins. Those would be for your power LED. And again, this one is, polarity does matter, so number 2, which is the upper right. Number 2 would be the positive, so that helps if you got nice dainty little fingers, but if you don't, it's still not impossible. So, I'm going to go with the power LED negative. Slides on. Now we can go back to that power switch. And ta-da! All connectors connected. Now, the only thing we got left is the fans and the RGB lighting. Now I've already pre-installed, this case came with a 3-way splitter for all 3 fans. I would like the fans connected to the motherboard, so I'm going to connect, because this has 3 fan headers, one for the CPU and 2 chassis fans. I put a splitter for the front fans, that's going to go on one header on the motherboard, and the other fan is going to get plugged into another header on the motherboard. So we just route this cable through as best as possible, as close to the fan header as possible, and we just look and we find that we have fan header here, fan header here. So, and we are running into a problem. Alrighty then, we do not have enough length to be able to plug that in over there. So, and by the way, the splitter for this is, the splitter that came with this case is not a splitter for the motherboard, it is a splitter for the Molex power. Like I said, I want it plugged into the, damn it. Come on. Why you? Oh God, this can be frustrating. All right, let's slide this back up there so I've got a little more slack. This is where you run into some issues where you got to do some troubleshooting. I do have another splitter, if my daughter would be kind enough to go out into the other room to grab me the, oh wait a minute, it's not in the other room. It is in my studio, believe it or not. Studio slash room. So, no, that is a red SATA cable. Now the red splitter is up in my bedroom. While we wait for her to go get that, we will not worry about the fans just yet. Put those off to the side. We will now focus on RGB strip. So I know that the bottom of the motherboard is right here, so I can route this through, give myself as much slack as possible. Being careful not to damage any of the pins on the connectors, because this does have a 3-way RGB splitter. And again, as with the review video of this case, there is a little arrow pointing for the 12-volt positive. So we look at the bottom of the motherboard to the, and of course it's not, yes it is marked. On this one, the 12-volt is toward the back of the case. So we look for that arrow, plug that in, so. We carefully tuck cable back around like that, and voila. Thank you. This is a 4-way PWM splitter, but it'll work. So we come over here to the corresponding fan header, plug that in like that. We route our cables like so. No, I don't like that. Route them under like that so that they're nice and neat. Still may not work, but we'll wait to see what we can do. So, got 2 fans. Okay, let's see where we can route these. Route these 2 fan connectors. Ta-da! Yeah, I'm not digging that. This is part of the fun of building a new computer, is being able to figure out where you're going to route all your cables. At least it's fun for me. Some people may not find it fun, but I do find it fun. So, for now, we will go ahead and connect these 2 up. That way we have fans hooked up. Now I can worry about cable management. Tuck those cables right there like that. Take a zip tie, reach around behind, and we just simply carefully zip tie these cables off to the side. It's not 100% prettiest, but it's also not a permanent solution. So, there. Ta-da, problem solved. Now we have our front I/O all hooked up, including our audio. Now we remove the zip tie holding the, no, we leave the zip tie intact. Give the cable a little tug. And we plug in the rear chassis fan. Like so. And voila! Computer is fully built. Now it's time to hook it up, and we already know that the system will post because of our handy little test bench. So we know it'll post. So now we just need to make sure that all of our wiring got routed properly and that everything will work like it's supposed to. Now for the moment of truth. And what do you know? Look over at the monitor. And I posted it into the BIOS. And we now have a working computer. Now all that's left is to power it down and finish up by putting side panels on. Tidy up a little bit with cable management in the back. And install Windows and antivirus and various other programs and basic setup and testing. That will be in part 4. So, just don't mind the dog. So, panel on. Figure out what I did with the output there. Install the screws. And again, with all the rest of the screws, snug but not mechanic tight. That side panel on. We just have one little zip tie right here to clip the end off of. And there you have it. Very carefully slide it into place. Install the thumb screws. Finger tight. And now for the best part of all, the peeling of the plastic. Oh, that is so nice. So there you have it. The completed build, mostly completed build, of the Masterbox Q300p by Coolermaster. And as always, if you liked this video and would like to see more, hit the subscribe button. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button or thumbs down, whatever. But do me the favor and smash the like button. And thank you for watching.